Everyone will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, if we can get everyone to reach out and just turn your microphones on for the meeting so that you can be heard as you speak.
It takes a second. There you go.
I guess this morning we're going to begin with the Bureau of Wildlife Protection. Is that right?
Nobody wants to take responsibility.
And they're not here yet.
Just saw Randy.
They not. If we can ask the regional directors, if people come in late, could you help them find a seat? We'd appreciate any assistance. Randy, good morning, sir. How are you? You're up. Yeah, well, you know, it's 8:31. I don't know what you're thinking. You can sit there.
That's all right. I'll move down here.
You can sit there.
Yeah. Just promoted.
We promoted you, Tom.
Better sit down here.
promoted
Help
you.
yourself out. Put on my phone catch.
So, it's the first thing on the agenda for BWP is the proposal for licensed guides. And as you're aware, here at the July meeting, that the proposal for guides was approved by the board. And I understand that there's been some discussion, maybe some comment that was received in regards to that proposal. So, I'm just looking for some guidance here, for some discussion on what that.
So we've gotten discussion. I sat in on the guide meeting, and they read the proposal as it was listed. And I know there was some discussion at the meeting about not exempting any guides, not exempting anybody. If you want to be a guide in Pennsylvania, you really just need to take the course and get certified, because if we're going to put our name on you and say that you are a certified guide, we want to know you're not a cook or just a turkey hunter, guide an elk or whatever. So I think that's the what we've been looking at and what we've been talking about.
For the commercial guides, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
commercial
for
guides.
commercial
paid,
guides,
for
right.
You want to grandfather anybody in.
Anybody? Oh, you don't want to grandfather
Correct.
anybody in?
We don't want to grandfather anybody.
And that was the comment from the guides themselves? They
Some
didn't?
of them were talking.
Well, I mean, some of them. I think if, the legitimate ones want everybody to be treated fairly right across the board.
Because you've got guys out there 2 or 3 years that are having to take it. You got a guy that's 5 years that doesn't have to take it, and he may have less information and less experience than a guy that's got 2 years.
Right.
So I think to make it legitimate and make it across the board, I think you just need to take the course. Well, we do have to. The one question was, do we have to go to Harrisburg? I mean, that was the biggest complaint that everybody had. I thought was, can we offer the guide course or test somewhere local to where these guys are at?
Well, I know that, that Chad Eiler, the chief of my Special Permits Enforcement Division, kind of took this on as far as developing and administering the test. I think to alleviate the burden from from the regional staff. So, I mean, that's certainly something that we can consider. We may have to get regional staff involved with it at that point to administer the test. But
Yeah.
we can certainly consider that.
I think that was the biggest issue that people were going to have, was having to drive all the way down to Harrisburg, take a day off from work, come down here and take the test.
We used to do the taxidermy exams. We used to do that. We used
Right.
to.
We hold it in South
rent
Central,
the- Yeah, South Central we used to have.
so it's centralized a little bit more.
Right.
I don't recall, because I know we talked about not grandfathering anybody. I don't think Chad had an issue with that.
No, I don't
Did
think he
he?
had an issue with it at all.
Do you know, I mean, with talking with him, if there was a,
I think the concept of grandfathering people was simply to get buy-in for the program. If existing guides were not required to take the test, there would be less pushback on the implementation of the program, essentially.
Because we have some already, like the Coyote and Fox Association, there's a number of them that are licensed guides to run hounds for both bobcat, so I think that was part of the consideration. Do we make them do it or not do it?
Yeah, it was just to ease implementation of the program, essentially.
Who is Chad?
Chad Eiler, he's the chief of my special
Okay,
permits division. He'll be the staff member that'll be developing the examination and implementing the program.
Randy, I think the issue though becomes if we're gonna have these guys take first aid courses, CPR, make sure they have some orientation. They could have been a guide and not know any of that stuff,
Right,
or we
right.
would be current. So I think really removing that exemption for the commercial guides, not for the ones that just wanna go help their buddy,
Right.
in elk season, it just makes sense.
I just speaking of that, I'm not a fan of a non-commercial guide license. If somebody's out, you draw a tag and you take your son with you and he's walking around, for him to go, hey, there's an elk, he has to have a commercial license, a non-commercial license, which to me it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not sure what the non-commercial license, other than, well, I won't say it, but I mean, really.
Yeah, what's the
I don't
thought
get it,
process
because
behind the
if
non-commercial license?
Because they can't get an elk license, so if they're gonna participate in a hunt in any way. if
They're not a
they-
licensed
If we didn't
hunter.
give them a guide permit, they would
Right.
technically be violating law.
But then we fix the law to make it so that they can participate. Because a lot of these guys are taking friends and family members up with them, and they're basically helping after the hunt ends. They're literally standing in a field, the guy shoots the elk, and they're gonna go do the rest, or help out. But do they all have to be now licensed because they pointed to an elk? I mean, I just have a.
Or they drug it out?
Or they drug it out, or they helped gut it.
Yeah,
or-
that, and maybe if Regional Director Mitchell was here, maybe he wants to weigh in on that a little bit, but essentially, yes, they would have to have
Yeah,
a
see, I
non-commercial.
think
And
we're
it's a
putting a
re-
burden on people that's an unreasonable burden, because they're gonna get tripped up in this.
What we do when we,
Make sure you're speaking into the
okay, every successful elk hunter receives a packet of information. They actually get 3 letters from us. I think it's in the second letter. We tell them that if you have a friend or a family member who's going to be hunting with you, that they need to get the $25 guiding permit, which is just a special use permit right now. And I believe the reason for that is every other species in Pennsylvania you can hunt on your general license. So if I want to take Brian turkey hunting, I have a turkey license. If I would have an elk tag and Brian would have an elk license, we could participate in the hunt legally under Title 34.
Correct.
But because there's only those 125 elk licenses that are given out, the way Title 34 is written, to participate in the hunt, because of the definition of hunting, you have to have a license or a special permit issued from the Game Commission. So we inform everybody about that in advance. People get them, we turn them around really quick when they do get them. And it's mainly because it's written in the law that you have to have either a license or that permit.
So we're already issuing those permits.
We are issuing those permits, and if this proposal passed, we would continue to issue those permits the exact same way. Prime example, Chris Krebs, one of our game wardens, drew a permit this year, and he was worried about how to get his elk out of the woods. And I know I told him that, a couple of us would get, those $25 permits, and if he killed an elk, we'd help him get it out.
Can we not call it then a guide, a non-commercial guide license? Because that
Yeah.
just puts a connotation on something else.
Call it whatever they
I'm
want.
sure we can
Right.
change the.
Just leave it as a special use permit or something like that to participate, or participation permit, I don't care, but to label somebody as a guide.
When they're just
when
participating,
they're just
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I think we can tweak that.
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
For as many elk tags as we dish out. I mean, why can't we just ask these folks that if they're not gonna hire a licensed professional guide, if they're gonna have family members help them, call, carry, whatever, just declare ahead of time in their licensing procedure. Just have them declare,
Yeah, guest list.
yeah, Bob, Joe, Frank, and Tim are gonna be my assistants.
Because it's still a
I know, but can we
right.
change that? Can we change
Yeah,
Title
change the
34?
law. We don't have a law, we don't change the
It's
law.
under definition of hunt.
Yeah,
Section
it doesn't
102
can't
of
change
the
that.
law.
That's word, but,
Right.
that would have to go through the legislature.
Yeah, I just have a problem calling it a non-commercial guide license. I think if we leave it as a special use permit or as
A participation permit.
participation permit, I'm okay with that.
Because I could see commercial guides trying
Yeah,
to
weasel
walk
in
that
on it,
line.
right.
And
Right.
Right, and that came up at the guide meeting, and one of the things that we would do is, just our officers would be able to, how odd would it be for the same person to have a friend or family member draw a tag 5 years in a row, or 3 years in a row? So, they're gonna have to do a little bit of investigation work when they run into people in the field to see, and if you keep seeing that same person hunting with someone and they're not a commercial guide, then it's time to launch an investigation and see exactly what's going on.
How much is the special use permit?
$25.
Same as second.
And there's none of the testing requirements
No,
or
right,
any of that
right.
accompany.
Then don't call them a guide because that's not
Yeah.
what they are.
No, you're absolutely right, participation.
Yeah, that works.
Works. Cool.
Okay?
Yep,
Thanks, Dave.
you done with that?
I think so.
Cool.
thank you for dressing appropriately for this meeting.
All right. So, the next one on the agenda is the Pine Tuning Middle Creek proposal, and this actually came to our attention from Mr. Daly from an email from a gentleman. I believe everybody got a briefing paper on that? It's a pretty simple, regulatory change, but the issue is both at Pine Tuning and at Middle Creek, in our regulations, the executive director has the authority to select one day for special goose hunt, which is for disabled veterans. And in the regulatory language, it says people that are eligible to participate must be a holder of a disabled veterans license. We have two classes of disabled veterans license. We have 100% disabled, which is a free license, and then we have the new 60 to 90% or 99% disabled veterans license, which is a reduced fee, like $1 or $2. The issue is when a hunter who is a disabled veteran reaches the age of 65 and purchases a senior lifetime license, that makes him ineligible to now participate in the disabled veterans hunt, even though he's a disabled veteran. So it's a simple regulatory change that we can make, or that the board can make to allow senior lifetime license holders who can show proof documentation of their disability from the Veterans Administration to continue to participate in this special goose hunt at Pine
Can we
Tuning.
just make it someone who previously had the disabled veterans license? Do we have records? Do we keep records of that? Instead of making them go out and
It
get
would be
proof
listed
from
on
the
the
VA
ballot.
again.
Well, they already have proof.
They have
They have provided us proof in order to get the disabled
Original
veterans
license.
license in the first place, so.
I don't know.
And
Anyone have an issue with that one?
No, the only thing I wanted to check on, because Dave Mitchell said that right now at Middle Creek, because they have the pit blinds, they really don't have a disabled hunt like they do at Pine Tuning, but they could in the future if they make those accessible. So the way this is written would be fine, right? I mean, if they decide to do that in the future, then they would be able to do so, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Pretty simple. It'll affect a very small number of hunters, but it's something positive that we can do for the disabled veterans, so. Okay. And then, the last one we have, is mentored hunters. And it says 12 to 15 years of age on my copy of the agenda, but the briefing paper I have, I think it says 12 to 18 years of age.
Should be 18.
So I was hoping that our legal counsel was going to be here. He got stuck in traffic on, there was apparently a big accident out on Route 322 for this discussion.
He's here.
He's here.
He's there.
He's hiding behind you.
Made it. You missed the Pledge of Allegiance too.
He did. He's stressed out. I don't know. You know, every time the attorney shows up with 2 binders full of material, you know it's not going to be simple.
No, good job. You,
Yeah.
open that discussion, Jason?
So the task that was provided to the Bureau was to look at expanding the mentor program to cover, we've loosely used as a descriptive term as the donut hole, the group that's now currently not covered, which actually is 12 to 17. Anyone who's 18 years of age or older is capable of getting the mentored adult permit. Whether or not we expand it just to the 12 to 15, which was part of a discussion, or go to the 12 to 17 is something that we'll certainly look for some direction on. But you know, whether or not we want to create a second donut hole or maintain a donut is, I think, outside of you know, maybe what the intentions are. I think we're looking to possibly close that. But the expansion creates a number of additional questions that we have to address. One of which is how this program is going to transition from the current existing mentored youth of pre-12. If we expand it to the 12 to 17, I think the simple answer to this is going to be yes. Are we going to allow those 11-year-old mentored permits to transition into the age of 12, you know, such that they would remain valid? That currently does not occur. Anyone who's 11 that turns 12, that permit becomes invalid on the date of their birthday. I think because they're going to be eligible for another permit the day that they turn 12, it seems most reasonable to look to maintaining the validity of that original $2.70 permit all the way through their 12 years of age hunting season until they have to purchase for the next year either a hunting license or a permit. The same is going to be true on the back end of the permit. If a person decides to stay a mentor after they turn into an adult, are we going to allow for that youth, or maybe we're going to call it a junior mentored permit, all the way into their adulthood on that transitionary year where they turn 18? That's another question. Do we want that to occur? That does and is authorized currently as we address junior hunters who purchase their license at 16, who become 17 during the license year. If we're talking about the junior hunting license, we allow for that license to remain valid. Again, I think the recommendation of the Bureau would be that that permit remain valid because it creates a lot of complexities to turn it off and you know, if there's any fairness issues at play. Maintaining this permit structure also creates another variable that we're kind of in a pickle on, which is the concept of what the mentored permit was intended to do. If we fill the donut hole, one reality is that someone can obtain a mentored permit at the age of, say, 4 years of age and maintain a mentored status all the way through to their age 21 and never enter the hunting license field. That's possible under the current structures.
Well, wait a minute.
If we're cap on the number of
Yeah,
years.
if we're creating it as we do for adults, you can only do it for 2 years as an
Right.
adult, correct?
I
So
believe-
why
Well-
wouldn't we do the same thing here?
And that's one of the questions is unless we add in, and right now the limitation for adults is statutory. That's actually found in 2711. If we were going to create a limitation on the time period in which they were eligible to participate in the program, we would have to either have that statute amended or more likely just go ahead and put it right in the regulation.
I would suggest that we put a limit on, you know, the statutory limit is 2 years, so I would carry that through the program. I mean, if you're a mentor and you're eligible to purchase a license, then you should be taking a hunter safety course, and they're available now.
Agreed.
online and in different places, so it doesn't make any sense that we would allow them to continue till they're 18 without a.
And I think staff has been in agreement on that point. We just wanted to make sure we're floating, all of the different concerns that really this new expansion would provide to us.
Right.
Another concern that we're addressing is the cost of the program. If we were to, depending on how we group these donut hole participants, are we going to maintain them as one group of mentored youth? So 12 through 16 is mentored youth, no differences in the program as it pertains to mentored youth. The species limitations, the tagging, all stays the same. There's an inherent benefit to doing that, primarily because we're not creating a whole new third structure, which would be a complexity for both our hunting public as well as our conservation officers who are enforcing, who are going to have yet another set of standards to have to maintain and understand and apply it to the field. So in that context, I think the Bureau is looking to possibly maintain a simple structure of mentored youth, mentored adult, with the two structures that apply to those, unless there's some desire to make any different accommodations. But then that throws in the next question, which is how do you apply the fee? Are we going to create any differing structure? Because what we do with the mentored adults is maintain the same fee for the participation as the hunting license would cost. Are we going to do the same for the juniors, which is a matter of, I think, $4 additional.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it can't be a way.
Because at that point, they're eligible.
Right.
Right, they're eligible for a license.
Right. So I don't think that they go to the, I think,
Okay.
I agree with Brian on that.
This is only for first-time hunters. Like, you can't purchase a license and then go back, not hunt for a year or two and then
No,
go into.
because to get a license, you need a hunter safety course.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no advantage going backwards
Right.
anyway.
But the regs, I think, address
limitation
that too,
going
says
back.
if you've never held. a
Never held,
license.
okay, thank you.
So the fee structure would remain the same as if they were purchasing a junior license then.
Jason, our goal here from now until eternity is not to make anything any more complicated. So we don't want another set of standards for anything that we're going to.
And I think we were hoping to move in that direction, is to keep it as, number one, accomplish the filling of the donut hole, which, some would argue, that we really should have been pointing to accomplishing here anyhow. But at the same time, build it into the current program without creating any additional complexities that really don't assist the hunting public or our game wardens in actually enforcing. But it does beg the next and probably the more lofty conceptual question as to what the mentored program is going to look like. I think to the extent that we fill this question on the participation from 12 all the way through adulthood, that you're not going to be able to maintain more than 3 years of participation in the mentored program. That addresses, I think, one of the largest concerns, I think, to the program, which is to have this ability for someone to cover the whole entire span of youth time frame without ever having purchased a hunting license, which I don't think the mentored program was ever intended to do, is to cut them out of the hunting license structures.
Right.
But what we have currently is the hunting license structure and the mentor program standing behind it as a kind of a secondary license structure. So I think we're in a lesser concern, but now that we've filled in the whole entire, or now that we're moving to fill entire the program with the donut hole being filled, I think we should be giving some consideration as to the purposes of that program to make sure that it still is maintaining its original goal of providing that initial recruitment access for folks that have not gone through the Hunter Ed program. So if there's any additional questions, hopefully we can answer those. But I think this discussion has answered some of the primary questions that we've had in trying to understand what this program or expansion should look like.
So currently, if somebody is in the mentored youth program as, whatever, from 1 to 11, do they fall under that provision where at 12 they would have to go to hunter education? Or are they allowed 3 more years now?
No.
If they've already had it for 3 years, then they should be done. It's a test drive.
Well,
That's really the intent.
I get that, but again, they can have it
From 4 to 11.
literally for 11 years.
Right.
Right.
So at
Because
12,
they're too young to get a
they have to
license, but once-
transition into
Well,
the,
and I think the question is, how do you deal with that
all right.
transition? Because if they maintain it for 3 years prior to turning 12, would the limitation kick in?
Yeah.
Or would you start the limitation from 12, meaning that they can run 11 through
I don't
15?
believe so. I think that and I don't know where it is now, but I think it should be,
Right.
as long as you've had
They've had their
3
test
years.
drive. If they're gonna be a hunter, they're gonna be a hunter.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the answer. I agree with Tim. I
Yeah.
mean, after 3 years, and I thought it was 2, but in the third year, you
I
had
thought it
to
was
get it.
too, but apparently it's.
I think we told you to, because you didn't want 3.
I didn't want 3.
Yeah, well, you just say yes.
I think the primary benefit of looking at it that way is the folks that are going to be turning 12 who have hunted for 3 or more years prior to attaining that age are obviously involved with either a mentor or a family of hunters that likely is already going to be promoting the transition to a licensed hunter anyway. It does provide additional access to privileges that are not available under the mentor program, albeit few, but there are enough there to justify, I think, the expansion that person would want to get the hunting license. Again, the only impediment at that point is the hunter ed certification, which largely shouldn't be that much of an impediment anymore. It's a shortened program and it's widely available.
Just to ask a question, have we done any, or have we gotten any results on the mentored program to determine if there's been an uptick in accidents or anything that concerns the mentored youth?
Yeah, I don't know
Or
that I'm
mentored
prepared to
program?
answer that question. Steve Smith, when he's
Yeah,
up, you can ask him.
Steve will probably have that information.
Can I ask just, I'm trying to remember, so, when the young hunters have accompaniment rules,
Correct.
and so do the older mentors, but I'm not sure that they're the same as far as being like within physical control. So what is the difference in accompaniment between the young mentored hunter and the older mentored hunter?
Well, if we are talking about existing structures, the difference between a mentored youth and I'm going to compare that right now to a mentored adult and junior hunters, because I treat them as both being in the same class. So mentored youth are the most restrictive because they have not been formally trained through any safety program that the Pennsylvania Game Commission has put on or that we've recognized as being acceptable from another state. They must be within arm's reach and capable of being physically controlled by the mentor while they're engaged in hunting. Additionally, they're not allowed to possess the firearm while in motion. Again, some of the safety training teaches you some of the simple techniques about how to move about, zones of fire, how to control your muzzle, how to cross barriers, things of that nature, that are significant safety hazards for someone who hasn't been trained.
They also are prohibited from possessing more than one sporting arm between the mentor and the youth.
Yeah.
Limited to one.
Yeah, and while that's additionally a safety hazard concern, I think the primary purpose behind that portion of it is to keep the mentor focused, not on his own hunting, but on the hunting activity as a youth, because it's so easy to become distracted. I'm looking off in this direction, he's looking off in this direction, and if there would be a safety hazard that pops up, another hunter, a house, or something of that nature, it would not be maybe as readily observed by the mentor to address the safety concern if he was hunting himself or herself. So the other group is the mentored adults and the junior hunters, which are not required to be within the same physical proximity, but must be close enough to be given oral instruction without aid of electronics or shouting. So the way we do that is it's again, it's going to be close enough where they can talk. We've never given any distance to that because I think every situation is going to be a little bit different. But close enough where you can give instruction, hey, somebody's coming over the rise or whatever the case may be, so that more mature hunter is capable of understanding that maybe there's something, as far as safety to be concerned with.
So which one would we want to apply to,
Well,
let's say, a
and
12-year-old that
that's-
just starts as a mentor?
That's
So
a
to
legitimate
me,
question.
It would seem that you would go with the younger, more restrictive rules for that 12-year-old.
I would tend to agree. Again, we presume that the people who, 12 years old, 13 years old, all the way up to 15, are given the flexibility of not having to be in that immediate proximity because every single person that current standard applies to has hunter ed. So if we maintain this expectation that you must remain in close physical proximity of the mentor, that they can touch you, control your movements and use of the firearm, it would make more sense that that untrained person follow that same structure. And again, I think it encourages, if this person is that early in their development of becoming a hunter, I don't know that there's going to be much objection to, having to accommodate those controls. But it also provides that incentive that when I want to graduate, there's still in effect, a graduation to purchasing that first hunting license, that you get something more, something new and expanded hunting capabilities that didn't previously exist.
Carry your own firearm for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Anything else?
Okay. It leaves one last question, and I just want to kind of cover this. I think it's self-evident. Right now, the adult program begins at 18. The statute allows us to back it up to 17. It would be my recommendation that we back the adult program up to 17 so that we maintain coverage of the mentor program up to 16 and no later, because otherwise we would be covering 17-year-olds under the youth structure when we do not maintain that current structure for licensing. And again, just for consistency, we created the adult program. We decided to at 18 rather than 17, even though the law allowed us. But I think with these changes, it would make more sense to continue to maintain the 17-year-old into the adult age group, just as we do for hunting license sales, and have them abide by all the structures for adults. Okay.
More consistent. That is all I have, gentlemen.
That's it? Everybody good? Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving on to the Bureau of Wildlife Management.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
How you doing?
Good.
Matthew.
How are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good. We're doing good. So we're going to go over three things today. I've got elk season proposal, where we're looking to make some changes in the elk season structure, Saturday opener for firearms, deer season, and then a status revision for the threatened and endangered birds. So what we'll do today is I brought Ian up with me. He's got a lot of background information on the briefing paper that we wrote you on the Saturday firearms opener. Everybody's well aware that opener is typically Monday, and that's been kind of the way it has been for certainly as long as I can remember. And so what we did is we put together a briefing paper of kind of the positives and negatives that we can expect with the firearm season being moved to a Saturday rather than a traditional Monday. And so we went through that, provided some parallels with the bear season, which unfortunately, even though it was requested to provide, it's really not apples and oranges, because there's a lot of variables in that bear season that kind of remove it from being useful. And so we'll kind of open it up to any questions that Ian and I could answer, or any more input that you guys need. But ultimately, we suggested at the end of that briefing paper that if there is an interest in doing this, that we provide some more actual data where we can go out. A lot of what we have is from hunters, and we have some information that go directly with age class and so on of the hunters. But overwhelmingly, it seems like the hunters do like the Monday morning. But we could also do some other things like R3, how much If we did change it to a Saturday, how much would we be able to reactivate some of the other hunters that are out there? How much would we be able to get new hunters involved, things like that. And so we would certainly take those charge orders if that was suggested, but anyways.
What about a split opener? This, I'm not, necessarily for Saturday, especially if we don't have Sunday. If we're gonna have a Saturday opener, then it makes sense if we have Sunday hunting to bring in a Saturday opener, then you keep them for the weekend instead of just coming up. Economically speaking, somebody's gonna hunt Saturday, they're gonna go home Sunday, they're not gonna stick around. So if you had the Sunday though, you're keeping them there for a longer period of time. My question is, how about a split opener? How about southern, like an opener on a Saturday in the southern part of the state and the northern part of the state, have a traditional Monday opener? I mean, does that create a lot of issues for us, or?
Confusion and delay.
I think you'd have divisiveness with the northern people. I agree with Brian or Tim's comments on the Sunday. Speaking of two kids that are in college, and I know a lot of kids are in college, Saturday certainly makes sense for those college kids to keep them engaged, but it doesn't make sense until we get to Sunday hunting. I think the comments were exactly correct. You'd have some economic issues, especially in the north central region, of people either not coming or coming for one day. And there's a lot of tradition. I grew up with camp life, a lot of tradition for Friday, Saturday, and then Monday, Tuesday. So
Sure.
I think you should survey though or some data of keeping college kids engaged. I don't know what the college rate is now. When I grew up, it was, well, in the north central, it was 10% went to college. Now it has to be 80%, or 50 to 80%. So if we can keep those college kids engaged, I mean, the amount of money you pay for college now, when I went to IUP, was $2,000. I skipped a couple days. I mean, even state schools are $10,000. So parents are paying a lot, or the kids are paying a lot of money. They don't like to skip like they did. So that's my own comments. But I agree with the comments of, until we have Sunday hunting, it doesn't make sense.
I think it actually does. It's an additional day to hunt. You gotta remember, if someone really has that camp tradition, they can still go up on Sunday and hunt Monday through the rest of the week. But if they wanted to hunt locally on Saturday, because that day is now open to them, we're not taking anything away, we're adding a day. I think the other thing we have to remember is that when you survey existing hunters, first of all, our existing hunters are generally 55 plus. That question could have just as easily been, do you like change? And they all would have said no, okay? So one of the things, that's something we do have to remember. Now, if you look at those numbers you put together, at the youngest age group, it was 50-50. It was essentially split. So I think what we're missing, though, is what you said. The people we may recruit into hunting, because now they can hunt on a Saturday. The people that are now in college and can't get Monday off, and so by asking the existing people, we're missing that boat. We haven't gotten that information.
Sure.
And I don't want to over-rely on data. Sometimes you got to rely on what makes sense. And really, there's nothing that's wrong with Saturday. We know biologically it's not a problem. We know that if eventually the legislature puts Sunday in, it really becomes a bonus. But we haven't taken anything away from the hunter by adding Saturday. So, and it's kind of funny when we look at this whole SDIC process, right? What you're trying to do is get people that aren't going to be vehemently opposed. So the questions right now don't say, will you be vehemently opposed if I create a Saturday opener? They just say, do you prefer? Well, they don't want change. So yeah, they prefer it. But will they be vehemently opposed to somebody being able to hunt on Saturday?
Well, and you're right, because that same group of people are the ones that are telling us that we're not doing enough to recruit new hunters.
Right.
So at some point, we talk about this all the time, just have to do the right thing. And whether that's a Sunday opener or a Saturday opener or not, that's something that we have to figure out and decide.
One thing I kind of came to as I was working with Ian, and he can probably go a little deeper into this. My history with this isn't as deep as his or the rest of my bureau, but is the loss for small game. You are taking away a Saturday from the small game
The
hunters.
numbers he put in here, there's been an 80-some% decline in small game already. So are we trying to salvage that little bit of small game, or do we want to create a new opportunity? That's really what you're weighing against it.
It's a fair question, but I think we could come up with some information, or at least some SDIC process to at least have some data to go on. What exactly will that do, both positive and negative?
And also, I don't know how you survey this, but speaking for the North Central area, the days of guys going to camp and girls for a week, the camps are closing Monday night or Tuesday morning. They have to get back to work. Kids are all over the place, and they don't come up till Sunday morning, a lot of them. And camps are vacant. Your officers can look at that. It's in the minority of people that travel, and I'm speaking North Central, that they're in camp for 3, 4, 5 days in hunting season. So, and there's a lot of kids, the kids are home for college, so they stay at home. So, yeah, I think we need to look at the opportunities it gets, but if you survey there's a strong tradition in Pennsylvania Monday, so. But, yeah, the economic impact of North Central, just go survey the Sykesville Pancake Fry. 3 days, 24, I don't know if it's still 24 hours, but it's vacant there now mostly.
Well, and we really don't need to survey hunters to find out
Right.
if they want a Monday opener. We know that
Right,
already.
exactly.
We've had that discussion, right? So it's just a matter of what we need to do to create opportunities for hunters that we don't have yet, that we need to recruit,
Right.
and those that we need to retain.
Even with our youth, all right? We started on a Monday. Some areas, they have Monday off of school. And they have 2 Saturdays. Inclement weather,
Yeah,
you only have a day or 2 unless they take off of school.
Right.
You throw them an extra day out, I think that's a plus for youth, really.
I agree.
Well, I think that was the other question too. Do we leave 3 Saturdays?
Yeah.
That's a question about the resource, I think, that we need to answer. But
If we were gonna start it on a Saturday and end it on a
And
Saturday,
on Saturday.
give them an extra day to get out there. Keep saying you wanna do things to get youth more involved, well, give them a little bit more time.
Yeah, as
And
far as,
youth really like.
people aren't hunting like last Saturday now.
Yes.
Monday.
in the North Central, yeah, by noon on Monday, they're done.
Actually, in
Well-
my area, I'll tell you the truth, is the first Saturday, just because dole season opened up. I see more people in the woods on the first Saturday than on the first day. Because they can get either or.
Well, they can get time off.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, remember, the way everybody's working anymore, some
Yeah, the
people work
economy's-
6 days a week.
Economy's
That's
booming.
why I'd
so,
love
yeah.
to see Sunday hunting. If you work 6 days a week, where's the time off?
I think we ought to have all of our ducks in a row for a Saturday opener, but wait to see what happens with Sunday hunting.
I hate to see us create a Saturday opener, allow a Saturday opener, and then have the season become actually a one-day season. Because currently, right now, I think people come up, they hunt Monday, Tuesday, and half a day Wednesday, and they go home Wednesday, so you've got,
that.
and then they come back the following Saturday. I'm afraid that if we open it up on Saturday with Sunday off, people are liable to go back home and not come up and hunt the Monday, Tuesday. And so you have an economic impact there, and you have a social impact there as well, because people are just not gonna be there. But I'm not against Saturday opener. I'm saying if we get a combination, if the legislature moves on the Sunday hunting, I think Saturday's the smart thing for everybody at that point, because then you'll get the guy that'll stay the 4 or 5 days now, and he'll hunt longer because he's there. But with that break in the middle, it just, I don't know.
The real thing from our bureau's standpoint, the bottom line is, it's really not a biological issue. It's all these social and recruitment issues that some of which we don't really understand very well. And so I think that's the bottom line of the paper, is that we need to get some better data on. And once you pull on this one string, you're pulling on a lot of other strings that we're not quite sure what happens. So we need to know more about that.
Yeah, because our standpoint for the Sunday hunting as well, biologically, Chris and his crew will be able to handle that effect on the deer numbers with their following deer recommendations and so on, if it does even have an effect. I mean, it's just probably going to shift it. And at that point, you know, that's the good thing about our deer management program, is it can handle those kind of shifts and adjust for it if needed.
Yeah, so I mean, just from the conversation, I don't hear any opposition to a Saturday opener. The opposition is to whether we need that Sunday to go along with it or not. So I think that's where we need
To talk it.
to fix the problem.
I think it behooves us to be prepared
Okay.
for that.
And the next time we send out a survey, can you let the commissioners know so we're providing answers that are correct? Because when I got hit with that, oh, you guys are looking to change the season, you're looking to, well, especially this was on elk, when you did the elk survey. And I knew absolutely nothing about the survey, and, you know, people were like, well, you're changing the season, you're adding an archery, you're doing this, you're doing that, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yes, sir. It's no problem. We'll be happy to do that.
What do you have? We talked over you the whole time. You didn't even get to do a presentation.
I don't have much of a presentation.
Wait, that's kind of the nice thing about getting a briefing.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Is that we're all ready for you, so.
He's the one with the real answers.
Yeah.
But you're right, that we try to cover most of those things in the briefing
Yeah, that's
paper. And I realize this came out pretty late, so you may not even had time to digest it yet at this point, but that's what oftentimes, certainly for me, I write better than I talk, so it's easier to get these issues down on paper and discuss them that way rather than try to do it off the cuff verbally. So we're ready to move to elk. I'll do just a brief, is there any other questions on the Saturday opener? Just a brief introduction. If you think it seems awfully early to be talking about 2019 seasons and bag limits at this point, you're right. We haven't changed the overall process, which we're just now getting started with. There's going to be several iterations of internal review that happen over the next few months. We'll typically at the December working group meeting, we provide some highlights of the expected changes that we're going to be recommending. And then obviously in January, the first full slate comes out for commissioners to give preliminary approval on. And for most species and seasons, that's going to be the same process this year. Elk is a little bit of a special case because some of the changes that Jeremy's going to be talking about that we're proposing, they sound simple enough on the surface, but for our Bureau of Automated Technology Services and Administration licensing, there's a whole lot of work that they'll need to do behind the scenes to make these things happen. So before we dump all that work on them, we want to at least get some preliminary feedback from commissioners. Do these proposed changes make sense, or are there some tweaks we need to think about, or there aspects of them that are a non-starter for whatever reason? So Jeremy's going to cover the details of that, and we're very interested in some feedback so we can go back to the other parts of the agency that'll need to do some of the grunt work of implementation on this and make sure we're giving them the right marching orders to move forward. So, Jeremy.
Great, thanks, Ian. So I've got about 10 minutes of a presentation here just to paint the background. I know you've all looked at the briefing paper anyway, but just to paint the background on this and then answer any potential questions. But what we're proposing here is an early archery season, followed by our standard general season, and then an additional late firearm season. Current structure where we're at now is we've got a full week of general season during the first part of November, followed by a extended season the following week. So that's a Monday through Saturday, and then the extended season is also a Monday through Saturday. The extended season is outside the elk management area, just so everybody's clear on that. And I'm sorry, I do not know why that black thing is in there, but so just to talk about, you know, the motivation behind making some of these changes. Under our current structure, one of the complaints that we do get consistently from a lot of the elk hunters is an issue of overcrowding. And just to show an example of that, Zone 2, for example, here, we have 25 cows in that this year. That's a tremendous number of hunters to pack into a single zone over a 6-day season. So that's one of the examples of overcrowding. Other zones have similar problems. Second thing would be CWD infection, and this is slightly pessimistic but realistic. Just to show you, where CWD is at, you all know this, but it has not reached our elk population yet. We test 100% of our hunter harvested samples, plus road kills, plus pretty much any animal we can get our hands on. They've all come back not detected at the moment, so, but the bad thing to say here is that it's going to make it into our elk population eventually. It's either going to spill over from those wild positives in DMA3 or DMA2, or potentially from a captive facility. There are 87 captive facilities within the EMA and within a 15-mile buffer around it. So, overcrowding, CWD infection is 2 of them. Another one is going to be elk-human conflicts. And just for a sense on what that looks like, this is the seasonal distribution of it. Obviously, there's a huge uptick in conflicts around the rut. Elk are just more active and behaving somewhat abnormally because they're full of testosterone. And then that late bump into the winter months, into December, January, February, most of that is road kills. Again, our current elk season is right about there, and so it's not in the best timing placement to address a lot of those conflicts. And the last thing I'll talk about is habituation. And why is habituation an issue? First and foremost, it's human safety, right? So you've got a 7 or 8 year old there, like 10 feet from an elk. You also have somebody sitting in a chair with a big bull behind them. And obviously those are all clear risks to human safety. Take that to an extreme. This is not Pennsylvania. Some of you have seen this video, but this was Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And the flip side of the human safety aspect is that when you get situations like this, the animal always loses, right? So obviously the park, having seen that, the following day went and euthanized that animal. So animal welfare is a concern with habituation as well. And then lastly, I'll just say credibility. This was a bull that was named back in 2014, commonly named by a lot of the photographers and people that frequent the Benazet area, and then it was harvested in 2014, and that cast some bad light on us, and so it's not positive for our image. Okay, so how are we actually going to address all of those things? And that's where I'm going to get into this proposal here. Is first, I would say an early archery season, last 2 weeks of September, followed by the regular general season, first full week of November, and then followed by a late antlerless only season in the early part of January. Archery season would be late September, very low number of tags, specific zones, and field checks. So we'd still have the mandatory checking requirement, but we would accomplish that through field checking, not a check station, same way we do bear for archery. General season is basically, standard repeat of what we have now. The only difference would be we'd split the tags between this one and the late antlerless. I would still say for the time being, early on anyway, keep 70% of the tags in that general season. For logistical purposes, because we have that check station and it's convenient and easy opportunity to get all the samples that we need in a short window. And then followed later on by the late antlerless season that has the remaining 30% of those tags. Again, field checks would be utilized there. Okay, so the goal there is to reduce crowding by splitting those tags across the general and late season. That would provide an additional structure to control and contain CWD when it does hit. We would have increased flexibility for mitigating elk-human conflicts, and that should potentially reduce habituation as well. One other thing that I should mention is that it may have a chance of improving the odds of drawing. I can't guarantee this, but if we've got 30,000 applicants, approximately, we actually have more than that, but if we have 30,000 applicants normally going into that early general season, or excuse me, that middle general season, and then we offer these additional opportunities, some proportion of those individuals are likely to just apply for one season or just apply for the other, so it should reduce that pool overall. Okay, so it's pretty clear what our benefit is. We did ask hunters what they thought of this. So we have a post-elk hunt survey that we sent out. Those are the individuals that participated in the 2017 elk hunting season. We literally asked them, in addition to the regular season, would you apply for a 14-day either sex but archery only season for elk? 73% said they would. Similar question, in addition to the regular season, would you apply for a 7-day antlerless only late firearm season for elk? And we specified that this season would occur either in late December or early January, and 77% said yes on that. We then took that larger and went out to the elk applicants. So these are individuals that have not been pulled for a tag, but they've applied for elk in the past. We sampled 5,000. We sent out the survey to 5,000 We got a little over 50% response rate. And again, you know, would you apply for an archery season, a 2-week archery season? 79% yes. And would you apply for the late antlerless? 69% yes. So combined, you know, if we look at the post-hunt survey plus the applicant survey, those are tremendous support for both of those seasons. One quick thing just to show where we kind of stand with the rest of the eastern states. Pennsylvania's there. Kentucky obviously has the longest seasons simply because they have the most number of elk. But Kentucky and Tennessee are the only 2 states that have a designated archery season. All the other states have some form of split season with the exception of Minnesota. But again, Kentucky and Tennessee are the only ones that have that designated archery season. Kentucky estimates their success rates for their archery season at about 20%. They didn't have any information on wounding loss because they have such a great number of tags. Tennessee would probably be much more likely to where we're going to fit in. They have a very small number of tags issued for an archery season. And you can see that the first year they did it, nobody harvested any. They did have one that was reported as wounded and not recovered. Second year, 3 out of 7, none of them were wounded and not recovered. And then the last thing I'll say is that this is just an opportunity to increase hunter opportunity. Time seems to be one of the biggest things that we go back to on why people don't continue to hunt or hunt as much as they used to, and this would obviously increase the opportunity for people to hunt elk in Pennsylvania. And I will take any questions on any of that.
Question on the late season, antlerless only. How many bulls are we going to end up taking out of that in that season? How many? I mean, at what point are they dropping their antlers?
March.
Yeah. Okay, so it's after the season. I thought it was earlier.
No.
Okay,
There should not be any bulls taken in that late antlerless.
That would be my only concern anyway.
Right. No, we put both the bulls into the early archery and the general season because if you start putting bulls into that late season, there's going to be people complaining that all the big bulls were taken during those first 2 early seasons. So
I wouldn't want to see that. I just wanted to make sure that there was a mistake kill happening.
Yeah. Middle of March would be when shedding season comes on.
The archery season, you're only doing, in your brief paper, you're only doing specific zones. You're not going into the viewing area in that.
Correct. We would stay away from zones 2, 6, and 8, and that surrounds the prime viewing areas, just to avoid any conflict there.
So how many years of data do you think you need to find out whether you're getting the kill that you want or you need?
For the archery?
For the whole season, I mean, because you're going to split the antlerless, right, tags between the general hunting season and the late hunting season.
3 to 5. I'd be comfortable, making some forecasts based on 3 to 5 years of data.
And we're not certainly concerned about a population explosion in 3 to 5 years.
No.
But you're anticipating giving out more tags then to add to the archery? So
the archery would be separate from the existing allocation, yes, but in a very low number. And we anticipate relatively low success in that season as well. Again, it's going to take a few years to document that, whether that's true or not. But yeah, those would be additional tags to the regular allocation.
The archery is the only additional.
Correct.
The other ones we're going to split.
Correct.
Have you given consideration to the use of flintlock muzzle loaders as well?
I have not.
Could we look at that to see if other states do allow that? I guess, if archery is so-called primitive, I'm not sure how primitive it is anymore, then I would think that flintlocks are also primitive. So just a question, if you could look into that.
We certainly can. I can.
How many tags did you have for archery?
Initially, maybe 3 to 5 bulls and between 5 and 10 cows, at least starting off. Start very slow, see what the success rate is, see if we do have any wounding loss, and then make decisions from there.
What else? Any other ones? Are there concerns that you think you might have that we need to know about?
No, I mean, I think I put everything into that briefing paper as much as I could and tried to paint a picture here. So, you know all of my concerns and kind of how I feel about it. So, I'm good.
Any other questions from anyone? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so the last part, I'm going to ask Dan to come up here. So we're not looking for any specific input at this point. Basically, what we want to do is provide a status revision and status update, basically, with this presentation today, to give you guys an idea of where these species sit, and then basically what our Bureau recommendation is. And at that point, we'll leave it at that, because there's, obviously this is an in-depth issue that is going to require some thought on your end of where these repercussion effects could go, if there are any. But our point today is to provide a presentation overview of where these species sit.
So
Dan?
again, fairly brief, a bit of an overview. I'll reference some of the staff that are more routinely involved in collecting the information. But what is the data? What are we talking about here? So this is a very quick overview, and again, just referencing the agency mission, and as we have on the wall, connecting with wildlife. And some of these species provide great opportunities as we manage all species to integrate and give people an opportunity to enjoy these wildlife. As you've seen, and Patty Barber has presented in the past, the progress and the success of the peregrine falcon restoration, and it's been a great story, long-standing, long recovery. That chart, the bars show the number of nests across the state by year up to last year, and broken down into the different situations, bridges, buildings, and cliffs. So this is a great progress. The population is growing successfully. And I just want to illustrate that sometimes gathering this information is challenging. So this is almost like a little stories in pictures. So you have a big bridge, and this illustrates how this came about some years ago, but you have a big bridge. Somebody looks up under the bridge and sees there's a peregrine on that bridge. And you engage PennDOT maybe, and to get up into the structure, you get on the bridge itself, and sure enough, it's an adult peregrine. And as time goes, maybe a nest box is put in place, and you get out in the bridge structure and get into the nest, count the young, band the young, and document a successful nest. And that's just an example of what happens every year, time and time again, in the monitoring and the assessment of peregrine population. Of course, we do make an attempt to band young at, and I say prominent and accessible locations, such as the Rachel Carson State Office Building. And some of the board members have been out to peregrine bandings. And it's a great event. It gives us the ability to track those individuals through time. And we don't do all of them anymore. There's just too much. And I'll just mention as one of our conservation actions with peregrines that we are increasingly addressing challenges or conflicts with building owners and bridges where the birds, because of some maintenance issue, we have to do something to intervene rather in a conflict. So just three, Patty? Three this year. So in this case, 2 different nest sites, but where young were gone, we went into the building, retrieved the young, and fostered them into an alternate location. We're dealing with a big building and an interstate bridge, or a big bridge. We feel the responsibility to work with those, it's a landowner or PennDOT, to avoid and reduce the conflict. So we're doing that kind of very hands-on interaction because of each individual bird is valuable, and there's a lot of interest and support for them. So it's a very hands-on process. But we're very pleased to see peregrine continuing its progress. Next bird, piping plover. Again, last year Kathy Hafner brought the tremendous news that this federally endangered species began nesting at Presque Isle. My main point here is that Presque Isle is the only place that ever had them nesting. It's the only place that will ever have them nesting. This is the only habitat. So they don't really only nest on those beaches, and at this point, it's really out there at Gull Point, that furthest tip of Presque Isle. Now, of course, they hadn't nested in the state since the 50s. A single bird showed up, one on territory in 2016, and last year was the big success after some years of effort. 2 nesting pairs successfully produced young. This year, a single pair came back, produced 4 chicks that fledged. There was an additional territorial male. And from here on, we monitor with this team. The team includes Erie Bird Observatory staff, of course the state park staff, Game Commission in the lead, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because of the federal listing. It's a really intensive effort. We don't spend this much effort and identify a person to monitor a pair of bird, any other species. It's just that kind of intensive activity, and it requires it. And Kathy showed you the actions you do, protecting the nest. But it's a big story, and we're very pleased to have this species back in Pennsylvania, and we'll continue to work with to keep it. This is a species we haven't talked to you before, red knot. It is a federally threatened species that found regularly only at Presque Isle. It's the same habitat. It overlaps with the piping plover. It's a migratory shorebird that winters in South America, flies through the state for Arctic breeding. And just, again, kind of to familiarize ourselves with this bird, it is really regularly, in other words, annually found only in that same habitat as the plover. And this is where it occurs. At some point, I'd be interested in kind of talking about how do we know? Where do we get this data? In this case, it's primarily by the same observers who are monitoring the plover, as well as birders around the state who may or may not see one of these. So we don't really put a lot of effort to this species, but as a federally threatened bird, we need to recognize that it occurs here in Pennsylvania. Okay, 3 birds. I want to very quickly overview, and I'm sorry, but some of the text is cut off there, but just bat surveys. And again, Greg Turner has presented on details of bat data. How do we know about bats? It's a very different process because the species identification is more challenging. They're nocturnal. So I guess the point is it's really a staff-focused effort. And it's focused on 2 parts of their populations. The hibernaculus, which is the winter where they're hibernating, and the summer surveys where they either are in maternity sites or they're just across the landscape in the summer. For the hibernacular winter surveys, they're internal. You've seen pictures before, all suited up to go in the caves, and they're counting individuals. And then in the spring and the fall, we do what I've called exterior counts. They're harp traps. That illustration on the upper right is, it's hard to see. Take pictures of stuff at night, it's tough. But you seal off the entrance, you put up one way for the bats to get in and out, and as they come in and out, you catch them. The point is, it is really the best long-term monitoring data, focused at these known sites. And Pennsylvania, through Greg Turner's work and previously Cal Bachkowski's, we got some of the best data in the East because of that long-standing surveys of these hibernacula. The other data is more broad-based. In some cases, it's site-specific, but it's focused on the summer when the populations are breeding while they're raising their young. So they're either road-based acoustics, basically long-term monitoring. They may be counts at known maternity sites, those boxes or trees where we know bats are holding their young, and that does provide long-term monitoring. We also gather data from contractor surveys. These contractors are conducting surveys that are required generally through permits and often targeted to a federally listed species. They do standardized surveys and provide us the data. And it's a contractor. You have to process it carefully. It does provide location data, but the contractor work isn't really the kind of monitoring that we have as much control over. It's just a different source of data. So I don't know if that's, hopefully that's helpful. It was helpful to me to think it through as a bird guy. I'm like, well, where is the sources of data? It's hibernacula, intensive, site-specific, and a variety of different summer broad-based surveys. So again, the patterns that you've seen before, the northern long-eared bat is a federally listed species. This is the winter or hibernacula surveys, and things go up and down a little bit, and notice the scale, 500 to 1,000 or so. But after white nose, of course, we know the story well. The population's just dropped off. Most recently, they're counting bats in these hibernacula down in the almost single digits, or maybe 14 at 3 sites last year in the 2017 surveys. Very small numbers. The overall state population, if you compare known sites prior to white nose to known sites after, it's a 98.3%. That pattern continues. For me, honestly, the remarkable thing is that the species hangs on at all. After this collapse as a result of the disease, they do continue to hang on. So for the northern long-eared again, the summer contractor surveys, there's lots of surveys done. These contractors are doing things scattered all over the place. The same pattern. You can see the population was rising a little bit, but then as white nose became statewide, there was a little bit of a lag here, but since 2011, we're basically down to very, very low numbers. And as a context, I thought it was interesting, the contractor surveys counted 83 long-eared bats in the 2015-2016 season. Okay, that's a small number compared to the hundreds or maybe low thousands in the past. So another species. This is historically not real common. You notice the units are in the thousands. White nose hits were down to very small numbers in the last few years. In fact, 34 were counted in winter hibernacula at 11 sites. And that reflects a 92.5% decline pre and post. Similar with the summer contractor surveys, you get a big drop, maybe bumps up and down. I do have in green a small-footed bat, which is currently already threatened, and the federally indicated Indiana bat, which is in purple, which you don't hardly see. They're that rare. And the point here more is that in 2016, in all the contractor surveys done, a single a tricolored bat was detected. That's how rare they are. Okay, now for a species that formerly was one of the most abundant mammals in the state, notice the units again, we're talking in the hundreds of thousands in winter surveys historically. And the scale of this is really astonishing. Hasn't sunk into me as much, but this really reflects one of the most catastrophic declines of any species we've looked at in my career. The state population pre and post in the winter, 99% decline. The bars may have even fudged it just so you can see that they were detected in those 2013, 14 and on years. It's basically down to trivia. It does reflect 319 individuals counted at 11 sites in 2017. But again, compare that to 150,000 5 or 6 years prior. So this reflects for the little brown bat this catastrophic decline. Our summer contractor surveys, it's again broad-based, formerly in the thousands were counted by the summer contractors, and in 2015 and 16 a single little brown was detected by a contractor. It's catastrophic. So again, a summary for the little brown bat, formerly one of the most common mammals in the state, now restricted. We know of 36 summer maternity sites where little browns continue to occur, but the total counts are a few thousand individuals as opposed to tens or hundreds of thousands. And I just illustrate one of those maternity sites is a bat box that's been maintained at the Juniata Valley School for a long time, I don't know how many years. There's a condo, on the left, there's a kind of a bigger structure. They put a condo up there. Greg, that's not used though, right? The condo is not used. Yeah. So the taller structure are a couple traditional bat boxes that we've put out for years. They're ideal situations, and there's maybe up to 900 little brown bats in that one location. So in other words, a quarter of the state's total population occurs at that one location. We'd like to know more about it. Maybe we're going to do some more research, telemetry, potentially other things to figure out why are they holding out here. It's a good thing. But, you know, basically all your eggs in one basket, oh, this is a mammal. I don't know what the analogy is, but the point is that, you know, here we got a few hanging in there. It's a significant location in the state, but it's really the only location. So bat conservation, big issue, as you understand. We invest a lot of effort. There's a lot of collaboration. A request had been made for a more detailed presentation on the research and conservation associated with this white nose, and that will be provided at the September meeting. This is just a kind of a hint. A lot of gates get put up, sometimes with federal dollars, sometimes with industry dollars, but there's a lot of effort to protect the remaining locations and to understand the fungus and what we can do about it. If I say any more than that, I'll probably get something wrong. Greg Turner will provide the details in September. There's some great research being done. So again, this is a quick summary. We're acknowledging the trust responsibility of the agency for all these birds and mammals, some that are in trouble. I'm confident we can have some success in our conservation. We've demonstrated that with eagles, osprey, and peregrines are on their way. The challenges are tough with bats, but we're going to make the best effort. We're going to put that effort in, and it's for the long haul. It's not going to turn around quick. The bats don't have a lot of recovery potential, but we're going to work towards that success. And we're doing it on behalf of present and future generations. So I really appreciate the opportunity for this quick briefing. We'll be available for more details as time goes on, fleshing out the briefing paper that was provided earlier, and particularly with the bats, give you more details at the September meeting on the research and conservation that's being done. Really appreciate this opportunity. I'd be glad to take any questions.
I have a few.
Please.
So someone has had to do permitting in the past and go through the PNDI process, and then, you know, they came out with Conservation Explorer.
Yep.
If we were to list these, is it possible to keep the process so that companies aren't held up saying, well, they could be under some rough bark on that one tree somewhere in the state, but we don't know where, to the maternity sites that we know of, to the hibernacula that we know of, that definitely need protection. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
The problem I always had was, you know, it used to be even the eagles. They said, well, there could be an eagle anywhere in the state, so, you know, you're kind of screwed. We don't want to be there. We want to be where we know we're protecting the resource.
Absolutely. And if I may, there is a clear distinction between federal listing and state listing. And the feds have a much more stringent standard. Any harassment is considered take. I will assure you that we're very cognizant. We're focused. We're focused on just what you said, those sites that are known to host the species. And that's why my emphasis here was like known locations. I can assure you that that's what we're focused on known maternity sites. Now they're already pretty much protected. They're caves and mines. And known hibernacula. I'm sorry, I said it the wrong way. Maternity sites. We focus on those places where we know. And the other thing I'll assure you, we're going to work with those land as we do as a state agency. We're much more equipped to work proactively with landowners. A peregrine is an interesting example. They're on people's buildings, you know, and they got to do whatever, air conditioning. Rachel Carson tried to do air conditioning during the middle of the peregrine season. We said no. Okay, sometimes you have to say no. But they got it done later. You know what I'm saying? We will definitely work with those landowners. And it's not that kind of one-size-fits-all that sometimes the Fish and Wildlife Service has to use.
I think Greg should be congratulated with all the work he's done. I mean, it's like leading edge stuff.
Absolutely, and he'll show it off in September. We'll give him that opportunity. But does that address the concern you have?
Yeah, I just don't want to say every shaggy tree in the state
will not be
potential habitat.
It will not be that way. It'll be known locations, very focused on those places where we've gone in, we've identified the species, and we're addressing it. And for instance, right now, we don't know of any attic or home structure that hosts a little brown bat. They used to be in lots of them. And every time we're reported, oh, there's bats in my house, upon investigation in the recent, and even last 2 weeks ago, it was big browns. The big browns are moving in where little browns used to be. They see a bat, you can't tell the difference, at least as a civilian. Greg can tell the difference. But literally, every time in the last couple years we've gone in to investigate a human structure, it's been a big brown bat. They don't need the same protections.
Yeah, I'm glad we're gonna hear from Greg in September, because we've been talking about this a lot.
We're saving it better for later.
Yeah. But you know, the concerning thing obviously is recovery of bats.
Right.
Because even if everything was fixed today, we're looking at years and years and years until the population even gets back to half of what it was. But they have one pup a year, so they don't have multiple births.
Oh,
So we're looking at, you know, a long road, even if everything gets good right now. So maybe it's time to start thinking outside the box and figuring out what we can do to increase populations.
Greg is thinking outside the box, and I didn't include some of his research pictures, but he's got some scary spacesuit pictures where he's treating a hibernacula, treating it for the fungus. It's experimental.
Yeah.
So we're really trying some things to help save what we've got, give them the greatest potential for recovery. But I think we have to be realistic too. This is, for the very reasons you said, this is a long-haul recovery.
Yeah. Anything else? All right.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
After this, after the orange. Yep, Steve, you're on the orange seat.
This needs to take an hour.
I gotta be in 5 minutes.
We can take 2 breaks, there's not a big deal.
It's up to you guys. You guys go right now.
Yeah, I do.
You know what? Can we hold off? Can we take 5 real quick?
At Brian's age, we
And all the middle-aged men are having issues up front. I'll race it.
Hey, did you see Pam?
Yeah, I saw her. That's what I went out. Somebody said that, so I went out.
So we can start her earlier.